Once upon a time, in the heart of a drought-stricken land, there lived a woman named Amina. Her village, once thriving with green fields and flowing rivers, had been choked by the relentless sun and the winds that carried nothing but dust. Amina's world had collapsed the day her husband, Musa, was taken by a cruel illness that swept through the village like wildfire. He was the pillar of their family, a man whose strength and laughter had been Amina's anchor. Now, without him, the world seemed to close in on her, suffocating her with the weight of grief and despair. In the months that followed Musa's death, Amina struggled to hold her family together. She was a widow, alone in a world that seemed to care little for the cries of the poor. Her 3 children, their once bright eyes now hollow with hunger, looked to her for hope that she no longer had. Every day, she rose before dawn and walked the barren fields, her hands blistered and bleeding from the cracked earth that refused to yield. She knew the rains would not come, just as she knew that her husband would not return. The village whispered about her when she passed by. They called her strong, but Amina knew the truth. Strength was not what she felt, it was only the mask she wore. At night, when the children had fallen asleep, she wept silently, her body racked with sobs as she begged the heavens for relief. But the sky was as empty as her stomach, offering no answers, no salvation. One evening, as the sun bled red across the horizon, Amina collapsed in the middle of her field. Her body could take no more. She lay there, her face pressed into the dry earth, tasting the bitterness of her own failure. Her thoughts turned dark, and for the first time, she considered leaving it all behind, her children, her home, this life that had taken everything from her. What kind of mother was she, who could not even feed her own children? As she lay there, the wind began to howl, whipping dust into the air. It was then that she heard footsteps approaching. Slowly, she lifted her head, expecting to see nothing but more emptiness. But through the swirling dust, a figure emerged, walking toward her with the slow, deliberate steps of someone who had walked this path many times before. It was Maimuna, the village elder, an old woman who carried the weight of the years in her weathered face and hunched shoulders. "Amina," Maimuna said, her voice as sharp as the wind. "Get up." Amina wanted to cry out, to tell Maimuna that she couldn't, that she had no strength left. But something in the old woman's eyes stopped her. They were fierce, unyielding. Slowly, painfully, Amina pushed herself to her knees. "Why do you fight against the earth?" Maimuna asked, her voice cutting through the silence. "Why do you struggle alone?" Amina's voice was barely a whisper. "I have no choice. I must survive for my children." Maimuna knelt beside her, placing a hand on Amina's shoulder. Her touch was surprisingly firm, and Amina felt a strange warmth spread through her cold limbs. "Child, you carry too much on your own. No one survives alone. Not even the strongest tree can stand against the storm if its roots are weak." Amina's throat tightened with emotion. "But the village, they have nothing to give. They are as poor as I am." Maimuna's gaze darkened, and she stood, pulling Amina to her feet with surprising force. "You are not poor because you lack wealth, Amina. You are poor because you have closed yourself off from the very thing that gives life, community." Amina's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know how to ask for help. Everyone has their own struggles." Maimuna's voice softened, though her words remained sharp. "Asking for help does not make you weak. It makes you human. Do you think you are the first to suffer? The first to feel lost? Look around you, child. Every person in this village has known pain. But pain shared is pain lessened. You must open your heart, or it will wither and die like the crops you cling to." Amina trembled. She had not realized how tightly she had held onto her grief, how it had consumed her, leaving her blind to the possibility of hope. Maimuna, sensing her hesitation, reached into the folds of her ragged cloak and pulled out a small bundle wrapped in cloth. She placed it in Amina's hands. "Here. This is for you." Amina unwrapped the cloth, her breath catching as she saw what was inside: a handful of dried beans, a few grains of maize. It wasn't much, but in her hands, it felt like a treasure. Tears streamed down Amina's face as she looked up at Maimuna. Why are you giving this to me?" Maimuna smiled, a rare softness in her expression. "Because we must lift each other up when we fall. Tomorrow, the women of the village will come. We will help you plant these seeds. And when they grow, you will share your harvest with others who need it. That is how we survive. Together." Amina's knees buckled, and she fell to the ground, clutching the bundle to her chest as sobs tore through her. But this time, her tears were not born of despair. They were tears of release, of gratitude, of the first glimmer of hope she had felt since Musa's death. True to her word, the next day, the women of the village came, bringing with them whatever they could spare. They worked the fields with Amina, their hands sowing seeds not just into the earth but into Amina's heart. With each passing day, the weight on her shoulders grew lighter, and for the first time in a long time, she began to believe that there was a future for her children, a future not defined by laws, but by resilience. The rains eventually returned, though they came late. But by then, Amina had already learned the most valuable lesson of all: she was not alone. And in that knowledge, she found the strength to stand, like the baobab tree that towered over the village, unshaken by the storms of life. No matter how harsh the winds blew, Amina knew now that she, too, would endure.